And so the skill then that we're trying to develop in the students is this fluency with asking questions to get ideas.
Hello, and welcome to the Arts of Language podcast with Andrew Pudwa, founder of the Institute for Excellence in Writing, or as many like to say, IEW. My name is Julie Walker, and I'm honored to serve Andrew and IEW as the Director of Marketing. Our goal is to equip teachers and teaching parents with methods and materials which will aid them in training their students to become confident and competent communicators and thinkers. So, Andrew, we're about to turn the page from November to December, and for many of us, that means celebrating holidays. But here at IEW, it also means we're starting on
Unit 5.
That's right, Unit 5. So why 2 months for this unit? Is it that hard?
I don't think it's the unit that's hard. It's just the season that's hard because people get so busy running here, doing this, visiting, taking time off. The holiday just seems to... I figure if you get one good month out of December and January combined, you're probably doing well. So you can schedule it that way if you want to go a little faster, or if you don't do holidays, just charge through and finish sooner or have more time for Unit 7, 8, 9, and all that literature stuff at the end. But we pace it that way, Unit 5, December, January.
So before we go any further into some of the tips and tricks that you can give our listeners about how to teach Unit 5, I'd like to mention that we have done for years webinars that you go into great detail for a refresher course on Unit 5, which of course is based on our Teaching, Writing, Structure, and Style teacher training course. So this is an abridged version of your teaching.
And we point people back
yes.
to the original classics.
Yes.
But those webinars also have PowerPoint slides, and those are available online.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so we can just have a little fun and talk about Unit 5.
Exactly.
We don't have to teach everyone how to do it. They should already know or get inspired to go learn.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Good. So when I think of Unit 5, it's writing from pictures. We now no longer have any written source text. It's just a series of pictures. My first question that I'm thinking our listeners might have, is this kind of babyish? Just writing about pictures?
Well, as I say in the first section of the Teaching, Writing, Structure, and Style, I think it's very much an important step in the process of the 9 units because if you think about it, Unit 1 and 2, it's just dictated content. It's almost line for line. And then in Unit 3, generally you're retelling, in some cases shortening, longer stories, so you're not using every line. Unit 4, of course, that's clearly summarizing, where you take some of it but not all of it. However, we have to go to the place where it's just you and your brain and whatever you carry around it, and we called that creative writing. We call it now inventive writing.
And that's in Unit 7.
That's Unit 7. So this Unit 5 kind of holds an important spot, I think, in the development of the thinking skills from Unit 2 to 3 to 7. 5's in the middle. You don't get a story per se, but you're not completely alone. There's a set of pictures and a methodology of thinking about those pictures, describing the events contained therein. It can be a festive, silly, childlike enjoyment of imaginative writing, but I think there's a more underlying significant purpose, and that is learning how to look at a situation and ask some questions and find some content. So, that's where we are in the middle of from where we started, which to many people looks overly simplistic, but then when they try it with kids, even high school students, they discover the value. And where we want to go with Unit 7 and 8 and the more sophisticated inventive and essay writing.
Good. So for our listeners that may not be familiar with Unit 5, can you just take that 2-hour seminar and condense it down into a couple minutes?
Well, it's in its basic form, it's a 3-paragraph model. And the beginning idea, that as we teach it, is you have 3 pictures and 3 paragraphs. So each paragraph corresponds with a picture. We have introduced the idea of topic clincher in Unit 4. So we want to keep going with that, keep practicing that so that it gets reinforced and easier, more natural. The rule we introduced in Unit 4 is that the topic sentence and the clincher sentence must repeat or reflect 2 to 3 key words. And that's a very, very effective tool. One of the real gems of the structure and style approach, if you just do that, you'll seem more organized and intelligent just almost instantly. So we introduced that in Unit 4 with the topic-based paragraph summarizing references, and now in Unit 5 we want to continue that. So even though we don't have a subject with divisions like topics as we will in Units 4, 6, 7, and 8, we want to practice the rule. So we assign the topic sentence the job of saying the basic fact, the central fact of the picture. So what do you see? A boy sitting in a tree. Okay, so there's a boy sitting in a tree. So your topic sentence would reflect what you see in the picture. Then the next picture would be a different scene, probably something relating to that boy or that tree. And then the third picture would be a different picture, probably somehow relating to that as well. And so maybe the second picture has the boy flying through the air, and then the third picture has the boy standing on the chimney of a house.
Yes.
That's kind of fantastical, but who of us has not dreamed or imagined as a child of being able to fly, perhaps? Okay, so then you would identify the central fact of the picture, put those words in the topic sentence slot in the outline, and then, of course, you've got to write a whole paragraph about that boy in that tree and come up with the backstory. Who is this boy? Where did he come from? How did he get in the tree? Give him a name, give him some history. Maybe he found a magic potion. There's going to be all sorts of possibilities there. And so the skill then that we're trying to develop in the students is this fluency with asking questions to get ideas. As I've said before, I would have done very badly with this particular type of writing. Honestly, I still struggle with it a little bit. But when I was, a kid, if you showed me a picture of a guy, in a tree, I would have said, there is a guy in a tree. And I wouldn't have had any possible way to imagine stuff, to think of stuff. I didn't know how to think. Thinking would just happen. And if it didn't happen, well, then what do? You just sit around and wait, and then that becomes very frustrating and all that. So one of the great things that, I and so many other people have learned from working with the structure and style syllabus over the decades is actually how to think better. So now I see a guy in a tree. Who is this guy? Where did he come from? What is he thinking, feeling, doing? When did he get in the tree? Why is he in the tree? How is he going to deal with whatever's coming? Is there anything outside the picture? Is there anything invisible in the picture? And so these questions are basic tools for invention, tools for finding ideas. That is what I find now most interesting about the Unit 5 is that power to start that process of unlocking what we might call creativity or creative thinking. But for me, it's more like just find something. You can't create something from nothing. You can't force yourself to think a thought you can't think. You just have to find an idea. And, of course, the more ideas you carry around, the easier it will be to find something.
Right. So do you find that, I know you've kind of alluded to this already, but have you found yourself ever stumped when you see a series of pictures only to go into a class of kids and they completely understand what is happening in these pictures?
Oh, kids are so much better. I am just old and crusty, and I don't operate well outside the rules of logic and reality and common sense and physics. Kids are just not, they're still in that wild and crazy, fantastical, imaginative world where, dragons can play hide and seek and mouses can develop relationships with whales and superpowers can exist. And, I listen to that and I just think, oh, I'm just imaginatively impoverished here in my old age. What do I need to do? Practice more Unit 5s on myself.
Maybe, but I was thinking, even as you were describing this, I think this is probably a unit where the classroom teacher has a leg up.
Oh, yeah. I think if you can teach Unit 5 with a small group at least, or even a slightly larger group, then one kid will have an idea and another one will kind of play off that, and then someone will get a variation on that, and you get all sorts of kind of combination and permutation of ideas stirred up, and then they float around in the air, and then different people can grab those and then change them even more. So definitely teaching Unit 5 is easier with a group. So, in a classroom, you got built-in group, and it is, as I've used the term, before, kind of a Robin Hood style. Some have the richer imagination with the verbal facility to articulate that. Others are kind of the quiet type that wouldn't necessarily think or say it, but they can, grab on. So you can steal from the rich and give to the poor, but nobody's really losing. Everybody's gaining. In a home environment where you're trying to do this with kids, I think it's also a case where you could have the help of younger and older siblings. Mm-hmm. So possibly you have this Unit 5 assignment from maybe one of our theme-based writing books or something, whatever you're using, and you're doing it with a 6th grade student, but you've got handy 2 or 3 other kids of any age. Mm-hmm. Could be a high school senior, could be a 6-year-old, mm-hmm. right? They could participate in the conversation, helping to think of some possibilities, get the outline on the whiteboard at home. Okay, and then that's going to be a richer experience for everyone. But yes, I would say Unit 5 is one of those ones that works especially well in a widely mixed age or ability group because you don't have a source text to have to read. Mm-hmm. So the reading level is no longer a real issue. And the level of sophistication of ideas is very flexible. It's not like you have detailed facts about a person or an event that you may or may not be able to understand and recall very easily. No, this is pure imagination and freedom. A lot of kids love that. They mm-hmm. really like the imagination and freedom. A lot of them don't like it as well. They'd be happier. Just give me my books and let me copy some facts into keyword outlines. That's safe,
Great.
So that's why this is a good unit for everyone.
It is, yes. And when you say it's a good unit for everyone, I'm inclined to ask you about the time that you didn't teach this unit and the consequences.
Oh, yes. Well, the first couple years after I was trained, in Girard with Dr. Webster, I learned the system. I came back and I was teaching these little classes, and there were no materials like we have now. Mm-hmm. Good heavens, all the theme-based books and fleshed out lesson plans for teachers, and there was really nothing except the few source texts and things that were in Webster's original book. I just didn't really like personally the fiction side of it. I did Unit 3 because I kind of have to, but I didn't spend much time there. I wanted to get over to reports, mm-hmm. And then I thought Unit 5 is kind of dumb. They're writing from pictures. These are middle school students, so I need to get academically rigorous with them so their parents get their money worth, So I skipped Unit 5, went to Unit 6, did a little bit of Unit 7, but not in a wild way. More just,
My dog.
Yeah, from your experience. I didn't have an encouragement for people to get imaginative with Unit 7. And then I got to Unit 8, which is my real goal, was to say, okay, let's get to essays. So I did my best with Unit 8, and then I copied off many of the student papers, and I took them that next summer up to Gruard and showed them to Dr. Webster, and he looked over them, and he pointed out some of the good points. So dress-up's good, opener's good, topic clincher good, but conclusion to the essay, lousy, doesn't say anything. Next paper, dress-up good, opener, okay, topic clincher good, title, conclusion to the essay, stinks. Next one, conclusion, lousy. These don't say anything. These students aren't saying anything. And it took me, I think, several years to put the pieces together, but I finally did realize that in an essay, we're really asking students to add an opinion about the information they've collected up, which requires them to say what they think about that information. Well, how do you think about information? How do you think about anything? And I kind of realized that the brilliance of this system is that the odd-numbered units, 3 stories, 5 pictures, 7 inventive writing, that teaches the questions, the thinking skills, the ability to have a story, ask questions about it, have pictures or a situation, ask questions about it, use questions to draw what you think out of your head. And then the units 2, 4, 6, 4 and 6, mostly are how to collect up and organize ideas. So putting those together in Unit 7, you got to collect up and organize and tell what you think about that. So by skipping Unit 5, I was giving short shrift to the development of those thinking skills. And since I've come to realize, what is life? Situations.
Right.
Right? It's all just situations. And so to look at a picture, even a silly one, and be able to ask questions and think about it, that's the same skill to look at a situation in the world and ask questions and think about it.
And some people are naturally better at it than others, but everybody can learn to be better at it by practicing.
Absolutely. It's just a funny thing. We don't consider thinking as a skill to be developed the way we might consider music or art or penmanship or whatever. But you get better by practicing. So how many of us wake up and say, how am I going to practice my thinking skills today?
Right.
Mostly you just wake up and say, how am I going to get through this day and deal with all the things that come? And so we're very reflexive. We're not organized in practicing and training ourselves. And, I've been at this, almost, 25 years? And every time I go teach a class on, inventive writing or the Unit 5 or the high school essay intensive with the tools of invention, I practice in the process of teaching it, and I actually feel like I'm getting better. I can just give me anything and I can whip out an outline. It may not be good, but at least there's the fluency, right? Whereas I look at, even sometimes the parents that'll sit in the classes that I teach with kids, and they're just stumped. They're just staring at that blank paper. They got a topic sentence and one line of 3 key words, and they're there for 10 minutes. And I thought that would have been me 20 years ago.
Right.
So it is something we can all practice and learn.
So let me ask you to speak to the listener who's familiar with our syllabus, maybe has gone through the training once. They're not really clear on the difference between a Unit 3 and a Unit 5.
Yeah, so there is sometimes a bit of confusion. Unit 3 each paragraph has a different purpose. The first paragraph is basically the exposition, the characters and setting, telling what's going, the situation.
And you're asking specific questions that
Yes.
are when and
Who and where. Yeah, who, where, when for that first paragraph. The second paragraph is basically telling the problem or conflict. So we assign the question, what? What is the want or need? What is the problem? What do the characters think? What do they say? What do they do? The aspects of that what, that helps build the plot and the action. And then in the third paragraph, because we have the climax and resolution, we assign the question how. And then the kind of invisible question is why have this story? What type of message, moral lesson, theme is being presented here? So we have those questions, who, when, where, what, how, and why, assigned to different paragraphs. And each paragraph has a different job. In Unit 5, we don't have to worry about that. Every paragraph has the same job, and that is to describe the picture that is attached to that paragraph. So 3 pictures, 3 paragraphs, and all the questions are available. Who, what, where, why, when, how, outside, inside, invisible.
But you don't have to do all the questions.
Oh, no. The trick of the questions is you ask one, and if it gets you some answer out of your mind, it worked. Use that info. If you ask a question and you still feel blank, don't worry, just try a different question. And sometimes you could fill up the whole paragraph with one question, 5 times. What is he thinking? What else is he thinking? What else is he thinking? What else is he just go 7 things in the paragraph could just be what he's thinking.
Right.
And that would be perfectly legit, perfectly valid.
Great. So I'm now an experienced IEW teacher. I've been doing series of pictures for, many years. Taught through a couple theme-based books. I have the classroom supplement lesson plans because I'm a classroom teacher. I just have lots of these 3-picture sets. How can I switch it up a little bit? Make it just unique to me. I'm getting a little bored with all these pictures.
One way to really throw a wrench into the business is let the kids draw their own pictures. First time I tried that, it was because I hadn't prepared anything and I didn't know what to do, and I had all these kids showing up. And I thought, well, okay, I don't have any pictures. I said, you got 10 minutes, draw some pictures.
Nice.
And, some kids are like, I can't draw. Okay, just stick people is fine, just anything. And then I had him trade the pictures. And what was really interesting to everyone was that the person who wrote, the composition from someone else's pictures really had a completely different concept, totally different idea, storyline, whatever, than the person who created the pictures. So I tried that then again sometime after that, only I said homework is to draw 3 pictures. And then when they brought their pictures in, I made them trade. And they didn't want to. They're like, these are my pictures. I spent hours on these pictures. I don't want to trade. Okay, fine. And it's just an idea. And so that kind of opens up a whole new world of possibility. I do think that one way to refine this unit from kind of the silly comic book type of pictures in response you might get is to move into, say, some famous paintings or some pictures that represent historical scenes. Now
Washington crossing
the Delaware or Norman Rockwell paintings are good. There's so much. But, of course, the problem is in that case there aren't usually 3 in a sequence. Rockwell has a few that have 2 or 3 in a sequence. But then you can use the trick of the missing picture. So if you have 2 good pictures, you can, use the first one for the first paragraph, say, and the second one for the third paragraph, and then you say to the kids, if there were a picture in the middle here, what would you imagine it to be? And I wouldn't do this as a first assignment, but, I think it works because then they have to kind of imagine the scene. So I kind of like that Rockwell one with the kids in the car, all happy with the fishing pole and all the camping stuff, and they're facing forward and smiling. And then the next picture is they're all like exhausted and the junk is all over the place and they're just falling, head flopping on the way back. Well, what would be the scene in the middle?
Right.
If you had just one picture, you could do the same thing. Make the one picture one paragraph. It could be the first, and then you imagine the two after it, or it could be the middle, and you imagine a scene before and a scene after, or it could be the third, and you could imagine two scenes before it. In our seminar workbook, in the TWSS workbook, I think one of the best student compositions that I have ever read, especially a Unit 5 composition. And this was, of course, a very advanced student. But it's so worth reading. It's just beautiful because it was that Norman Rockwell picture of the teacher with the apple on the desk and the blackboard, happy birthday, Mrs. whatever her name was, and kids in the room and, that kind of early 90s style. The student who wrote that did a magnificent job of imagining the first picture, which was the teacher kind of sad, lonely, distressed, her backstory, how she sacrificed to raise her younger siblings and never got married, and now she lives in this tiny little place on this tiny little salary. And then in the next picture, the student describes the students, sneaking in and decorating the room. And then the third picture is the one you see. And that is just such a marvelous use of a great painting, a kind of heart-touching scenario that could happen for real in the world. And, of course, the student having so many years of structure and style experience, the language is magnificent. So I think that's a great one to model, especially if you're working with advanced students or high school kids or something.
Great. Well, our time is all up.
Oh, shoot.
If we had just maybe one more minute, I would ask you to tell the story of how Dr. Webster came up with this unit.
Yes, well, in the old days, Dr. Webster, before he was doctor, was Mr. Webster, and he was teaching. He taught almost every grade level, oftentimes mixed grade classrooms. But if his memory serves correctly, the way I recorded it as he was telling it to me, he was teaching a middle school, and one of the big behavior problems in middle school in those days was the smuggling into school of contraband material, comic books,
right.
which were not allowed. And so his job as, teacher was to confiscate the comic books so that the students couldn't sit in the back of the room and hide the comic book inside a school book. And so he gradually acquired a nice stack of comic books. But he thought, if the kids like these things, well, why not have them write about it? So he just got out some scissors and cut a few pictures out of a few comic books and pasted them onto paper and handed them back out to the kids and say, here, write some stories.
Right.
And, I'm sure his method of teaching it was refined over time, but it's kind of interesting that how he got that idea, thinking, well, if that's what they like, that's what we'll give them.
And I'm sure they love that, especially those that got their comic books back, or at least a piece of it, right?
My guess is that he was probably a very loved curmudgeon-y teacher.
Right. So Unit 5, great for special needs kids, great for those for English language learners, kind of great for everyone.
Oh, we've had a lot of good feedback from because ELL and ESL, they use pictures anyway, right? I mean, that's part of their whole methodology to try and, get more fluency with the vocabulary that the kids know, and even adults. So yes, this fits in extremely well there. And again, I would just say, especially if you just happen to be in, a person like me and you've got kids who aren't immediately imaginative with this, look at the samples in the book, talk about it, and help them as much as needed. If there's no law that says someone has to make this whole outline all by themselves.
Right.
All the assignments in Unit 5 can be group work if that's what it takes to help people be successful. And then next year you come to it again, it'll be a little easier, and the next year even easier.
Right. And that's what our goal is to be able to help these teachers and teaching parents with what they need to be successful as well. Thank you, Andrew.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, you can subscribe to this podcast in iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher, or just visit us each week at iew.com/podcasts. Until then, on behalf of Andrew Pudewa and the team at IEW, I thank you for the privilege of allowing us to partner with you on your journey toward better listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking.